Yeh studied law but switched to become an investment banker in Sydney after university. She then went to INSEAD and later moved to China to work in private equity. Welcome to Alumni Experience, Phoebe. Let's go back to your career before INSEAD. You worked for Goldman Sachs and Macquarie as an analyst. How did you like being a banker?
I think overall it was, in fact, a fairly, I would say, an environment that was conducive to people performing well. But the hours were really, I remember in my first 2 years, I probably had 2 or 3 weekends off. And in fact, I was called back on Christmas Day while I was away camping to drop everything and go back into the office to produce pitch books for a meeting that was happening in London. But you know, it was just it wasn't great for your personal life. Let's put it that way. My friends thought I had just disappeared off the face of the earth, and I ended up not having friends other than the ones that I had from work, basically. Yeah.
So you got out of banking and came to INSEAD. What was your next step?
When in order to get into INSEAD, we had to have references written by people. So one of the people that I asked was one of my clients at Goldman, and I was on the Virgin Group account, helping them to finance and IPO Virgin Blue, which is the low-cost airline that they started in Australia. So I got on quite well with one of the directors of the board. I asked him to help me write my reference letter, one of the references, and he was like very happy to do it. So he had done that. And by about, I think it was P3 or P4, I got an email, actually it was a voicemail from him saying, Phoebe, you must be close to graduating soon. Would you like to come and work for us in London? So that was the only contact that I had from him since I got him to write my letter. And they flew me out to London. I met with the group CEO, and he was, very keen for me to join them. And then I ended up, after INSEAD, I went to London to work with the Virgin Group. And that was through a connection that I had from Goldman, yeah.
After a while, Virgin asked you to set up a clean energy fund in China. How well did you know China at that point?
I wasn't very familiar with China. I'm from Taiwan. I grew up in Australia. I speak Mandarin, which is why I think I was the only person in the whole of Virgin Group that spoke Mandarin. So they had their eye on me to be sent to China. But in fact, it was a good transition because I was traveling there frequently for business. But moving to China was the first time I've ever lived there. It was. Despite my cultural background, it was still quite a cultural shock for me because I've never lived in a system where it's supposed to be communist, but it's not, you know. And there's quite a lot of restrictions on on communication. I remember sensing that my phone was bugged. There were times where CNN just got blacked out on TV. Things like that.
How does private equity work in China? What are the big challenges?
I think one of the biggest challenges for private equity professionals in China is the ability to source deals that are good. I'm sure that's the case in a lot of places, but China, it started opening up for economic development in the private sector only back in the 80s, and it's taken a long time for that to flourish. For the amount of capital we were looking to deploy per deal, it was quite difficult to find quality companies. And the other challenge that we had, and I'm sure a lot of investors face in China, is the veracity of the numbers that you're getting. Because oftentimes a company would keep 2, 3 sets of books, and they'll show the different books to whoever they're showing it to the tax authority, to your investors, to your, even listed companies in the U.S. from China are facing the problem of people not trusting what's coming out of the numbers. So if you're looking at even smaller companies, that challenge is much bigger.
You've subsequently become an entrepreneur and made your own investments. Are there still lots of opportunities in China for people with your skills?
Yes. I think there are a lot of opportunities in China for people who are willing to take risks and just try something different. I think, though, what I have also discovered is, for me personally, is that to have a long-lasting, successful business venture, it is better to pick a place to set up the business where you would like to be based on a full-time basis. So for me, I think if my business was primarily in Shanghai, it would have been a lot easier. But having to travel into a second-tier city like Wuhan, it's not a horrible place, but it's just not where I want to be all the time. And I think that was one of the challenges as well, from a lifestyle perspective. So, and I think in China, the business opportunities are increasingly moving inland, because Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, they're all fairly now well addressed by a lot of Western brands or Western businesses going in. But what isn't the case is when you go further in, the second, third tier cities. Yes, the opportunities there are boundless, but from a personal perspective, you would need to consider whether that is where you like to spend a lot of your time.
Would you encourage people with your kind of family background and language skills to go and work in China? Is it easy? Can you just kind of slot in?
I would say it depends on the individual. The language and the cultural reference definitely help. I think, though, if you look Chinese like me and you go, but you're not really familiar with the culture, you may actually be at a slight disadvantage to a complete foreigner who goes, because they get forgiven for not knowing things. Whereas someone like me who goes, I'm expected to know how things work. Going now is not like when I went 7 or 8 years ago. It's a different dynamic. Back then, they were really soaking up any kind of expats who would be willing to go work in China. Now, there is already like a generation of kind of middle managers who are local, who have been trained by managers who have gone from the West or from Hong Kong or Taiwan. So you have to bring something value added to the process. So you kind of need to think carefully about what is your role there that will allow you to compete better compared to like a local person who has also now had the chance to go through the training.